welcome. Welcome to Islandwood, and welcome to your first unmemorial. So some of you have already asked me, what is an unmemorial? Well, just before Paul left us, he decided that he wanted to make sure we didn't have a memorial service in honor of him. He said that once I'm gone, I'm not going to hear what you have to say. So make sure if you're going to have a gathering that it has some other significance other than honoring me. So, and lastly, he did say, get people outside afterwards, whatever you do. So we're going to do both of that. But after thinking about his comments, I decided today's gathering could be used as an opportunity to honor a few of our creative leaders who helped to support several of Paul's legacies. And today seemed like we could also focus on sharing our deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude, sorry if I cry, but it's what happens. So gratitude that our lives were made better by knowing Paul on our journey. And so as you arrived today, you were greeted with a bar of high-quality dark chocolate, which was Paul's favorite. He ate dark chocolate with every meal. And it was his favorite food group, as he would tell you. And he first introduced me to this because in my family, we grew up with Hershey's and white chocolate, which he said is not chocolate. But today, you also received a unmemorial journal. And I wanted to thank the people who helped to create that. One of them is an artist named Carolyn Dakin in New Zealand. She took several of Paul's photos. You know, he was a big photographer. He loved to take photos. So she took several of his personal photos and created a work of art, which really represents his favorite place, which is camping alongside a stream in the mountains. Now, you might notice that there are species of animals from different countries in that piece of artwork, but as she said to me, that will be for people to uncover on their own. So the back covers a collage created by Stella Lay, who's also here, and those were words we collected from many of you that we felt represented Paul. Some are a bit of a question mark, and I think you'll discover what they might mean when you're here at lunch today. And then the inside was created by Amy Andrews. Where are you, Amy? Are you in here? Amy, you're at the back of the room. So Amy did all of the design inside and did a fantastic job because she integrated so many quotes and poems that Paul was given over the last year as he got ready to leave. So thank you for all your help with this unmemorial journal. So as I said, photography was important to Paul, and since his family owned a camera shop and a photography studio in Medford, Oregon, Paul and his sister Sherry, who's here, Sherry, and they got photographed all the time. And then cute outfits. Paul didn't think they were so cute. But you'll see a lot of those on the screens out front in the Welcome Center and at lunch today. I find that it's hard to imagine that just next month I would have known Paul for 30 years, and that our first date was on July 5th, and our wedding date was the following year on July 5th. And we did that on purpose because we can't remember anything. And we thought that was a great way to get started. But you'll see also the photos outside. He was always taking selfies of us on the backcountry because we didn't have an iPhone back then, but he had this little camera with a timer on it. And so he'd set it on a rock, and then we'd get ourselves posed. So you'll see selfies of us everywhere in the backcountry on some of these photos that are outside in the Welcome Center. So when I was dating, or actually when I first met Paul, he was always wanting to go for a walk or a hike. And he taught me there's never bad weather, only bad weather gear. And so when getting prepared for a hiking trip overseas in Tasmania and New Zealand, which was while we were still dating, we went to REI to do a bit of shopping. How many of you have been to REI? Well, it's like a candy land. But the reason I thought that was so extraordinary in my memory of him is that I was looking for a color rain jacket I really liked. And what he explained to me was that there's different kinds of Gore-Tex. There's the one-layer system, the two-layer system, the three-layer system. the tests that stand up to being waterproof in high winds or breathable while climbing steep hills with a heavy backpack on. And I was constantly smiling inside while listening to him go on about all these technological details of the various Gore-Tex. And quite frankly, so many other things too. And that conversation in many ways represented a lot of our life. It's how his mind worked. He loved to study details, and he researched many topics to best understand how things work. And as several women, I think one of them's here, told me that worked for Paul when he had Aldous, this is before I knew him, when they found out that we were dating, they said, "Hey, we just want to warn you, but the guy's on the spectrum. He's a mini Rain Man, so don't think this is going to be a normal or easy relationship." Well, you know, in some ways they were right, but I also thought those behaviors were adorable, and he was remarkably dependable and focused on always getting things done. But I wanted to tell you that after arriving in Tasmania with him while we were still hiking, I began to understand why fabric technology was so important. The first afternoon of our day out, we had a freak snowstorm. And by dinner, we were hiking up in our hips in this snowstorm. And when we got to the first hut, we learned that the 4-day or 5-day trek had been closed. But Paul said, well, we'll go on. We'll be fine. There won't be many people here. It'll be quiet. It'll be a great experience. So we did. We went on. And so what I did learn is that by the 3rd day, the weather was clearing, and it was sunny. The snow had melted. But on the 4th day, we had leeches. And they were falling out of the trees, jumping from branches onto our heads and necks. And at night, we would watch them loop across the top of our tent because our flashlight could help us see them as they moved externally. But we had decided not to stay in tents because there were a lot of people who decided the same thing as us, that they were going to stay on the track. And we were quiet to have this outdoor tent. But by the 4th day, all the snow had melted, and unfortunately, the boardwalks that we had to walk on were flooded. And that made it hard to find your footing as you were going across underwater, looking for the edge of your boardwalk. Well, Paul lost his footing and fell in with this giant backpack on. And I can only tell you how hard it was to get him out of the water with the heavy backpack and then find there were leeches on him everywhere. So I'm thinking, wow, how do I find a ride back to the airport at the end of this trip? I don't think this guy's for me. And I knew we were supposed to go on a 4-day rafting trip at the end of this hike. So I was planning my escape. So as we were coming to the end of the trail on the last day, he suddenly turned to me and said, "What would you think if we canceled the next portion of our whitewater rafting trip and found a nice hotel with some good food and explored the local towns?" Well, that change of plan kept me in Tasmania. And I didn't return to Seattle. And the next 6 weeks, which we hiked in New Zealand, became really our favorite trip of all time, which is why we still, to this day, we're spending so much time there. No leeches in New Zealand. So the thing I wanted to say is that trip really said it all about Paul. He loved the wilderness. He loved the outdoors, but he also loved a beautiful hotel and fine dining, and he was comfortable in both. He could be happy in any extreme, and that's one of the things I just love so much about him. He also loved working as hard as he loved traveling, and one of the projects as I look back over the last 30 years that is still in awe to me is that we bought this 9 acres here on Bainbridge that was just full of blackberries, poison oak, amazing English ivy that was strangling Douglas fir trees. And we thought, oh my God, that's quite a project. And I was up for it. And eventually I talked him into it. So now, 28 years later, we live in this private park that has been restored with all these native species. That's amazing. And then when I think about other projects, I think about this 255-acre parcel here, how we were hiking in these woods, and there was a buck at the top of the trail. And, you know, I don't know how I thought about this, but I kept thinking, Paul, maybe we could preserve this, create a school in the woods for kids who never get to come into the woods. And then, of course, here we are now, having raised all this money to build this place. And then buying 9 acres next to where we live and turning that into a small community park with a labyrinth and a prayer wheel, or creating Wacky Nut Farm that has the most amazing community garden, or even this house we have in New Zealand, which then caused us crazily to buy a rundown campground and a general store. We don't know what happened to us. But Paul really was my inspiration for how we could always find a way to do the right thing. I was lucky. So many of the ideas I brought to him, he invested his heart and soul in. And what I also loved about him is he never pondered the meaning of life. The meaning of life to him was always clear. Work hard and make a difference. And each one of us has our own unique gifts that can work together. So if you haven't read the book, or is there anyone who's read the book Theo on Golden here? Oh, a few of you have. It's a bit long, I think, but it feels a bit like a political statement at this time where there's so much national cruelty here in the U.S. Several of us are convinced that the book's popularity right now is because it gently instructs us on how we're supposed to act towards each other. And this is a book about kindness, generosity, humility, and gentleness. It's a book about good manners and respect, some of which really described Paul. And the character, Theo, in the book also describes some of the people that we've been lucky enough to have worked with on this 30-year journey. So today, a couple things I wanted to do is to recognize a few folks, and I wanted to start with a group of 12 folks. They've, in many ways, represented creative leadership of collaboration and partnerships, which Paul really believed partnerships and collaboration was the only way you really got things done, and doing it with much kindness and generosity. So I'm going to call these people that you're going to meet our Theos of today at Islandwood. And I'm going to ask them all to come up front and just stand on the stage or next to the stage, because what we have for them is a small gift, which is a etched piece of glass by Preston Singletary, a Native American artist who's in our area and that we adore. So as I call these people out and bring them up, I'm just going to ask them to line up. Just hold your applause, because we're going to wait till they're all up here. And Darren and Sharon, why don't you bring up their pieces of glass as they come up. So the first Theo is actually Mr. and Mrs. Theo. They're married. They're our neighbors who helped establish Wacky Nut Farm in the community garden, and that's Len Bile and Stella Lay. Okay, let's hold our applause. We want to do this fast. And can you just stay up here, Len and Stella, while everybody else comes up? There's going to be 12 of you. The next individuals are Ann Crumbolts and Keiki Cahoe, who ran the Brainerd Foundation. And then we have Tom Novak, who ran Conservation Strategies. Tom, yay. And then our past CEO, retired CEO for 12 years, and our current CEO of Islandwood, Ben Klasky and Megan Karch. You're all Theos. And then we were really lucky when we started the Bainbridge Island Parks and Trails Foundation, because we knew we would only do it if we could get Barb Trafton to be our first executive director. So Barb, can you come up here? And then Dave Goldberg, you and your team at Methuen helped to create this whole place as our designers, and you've continued to serve on our board and to do works of miracles for everyone around. Catherine Schudemaker, or Catherine James Schudemaker. Catherine is a true connector who knows how to get shit done, and she's been a board member emeritus for Islandwood and is also on our board at the Headwaters Project down in New Zealand. And then one of my favorite neighbors in the whole world, next to Len and Stella, of course, is Marjorie Sheldon, who helped to start Mrs. Woolley's General Store down in New Zealand. And Marjorie, are you going to be able to get up here? Oh, yay, yay. I know there's a little bit of a walking issue there. And then is Gregory Glynn here? Gregory? Oh, yay. So Gregory stewarded our 9-acre property that has been the rehab project for over 20 years. And he's worked closely with Paul through so many of his entire disease processes, including many changes of personality. So I want to especially call out Gregory because he worked one-on-one with Paul for longer than really anybody else because he was at our house every day. And I was wondering, is a woman named Norma Eliason here? I know she was going to... She's here? Oh, yay. Norma, you are being recognized as one of the most extraordinary people who helped us manage all the financials for how do we do this with what Paul made when he sold his company. So Norma, big hugs to you and a piece of glass for you as well. So with that, what I'd like to do is just give everybody a round of applause. These are people who've been amazing. Okay, I also want to share, my nose, a special thank you to a couple of Paul's caregivers who were really there in the most challenging years that we had to manage, and I am so grateful to them. So Alicia and Atma, can you come up here? We have a beautiful Pendleton blanket for you here. Is Alicia, there you are. These two women were extraordinary, and I am so grateful. And there's another caregiver who helped us in New Zealand and here who had to move back to Boise, and that's Jill Conklin. Is Jill in here? Jill, where are you? Oh, great. We have a blanket for Jill as well. Thank you, Jill, for everything that you've done for us cross borders. And then I want to mention Jenny Stewart, who's in New Zealand. If you're listening on Zoom, we have your Pendleton blanket, and we'll be bringing that down with you later in the year. And then lastly, a big thank you to Krista Seymour, who worked with Paul for 17 years and through some of the most challenging years with the personality changes from the illness. And Krista is with her son today. He's graduating, so she couldn't be here, so I'm hoping she'll get to see this online. So thank you, guys. Well, I know that this last chapter of our, what we're calling sort of our physical relationship with Paul on this earth has closed, but I really feel that our stories and our love for him will continue, both in memory as well as with his presence in spirit. He's just everywhere. And so I know I've taken enough time today up, but I now want to give you your chance to listen to a few key people who helped him with some of the big initiatives that he worked on. Laura, you're up first.
Hi, let's see, I'm a little shorter. I'm blessed to be here to honor Paul and the amazing people of Aldous. Can anybody from Aldous want to? There's lots of folks here. Because creativity with collaboration is magic. I met Paul when I was a 27-year-old art director at the Seattle Weekly, applying for a job, and I was laying out the classified ads, if you remember those. I didn't realize how my life would change and the world as well. When I accepted the job, Paul sent me home with this little carrying case about 3 inches square. And at home, I pulled out one of the first Apple Macintoshes, this thing called a mouse, and a cassette tape with soothing music. And when I turned on the computer, it smiled at me and said, hello. It was the beginning of the experience of alchemy that happens when technology and creativity coalesce, and the rare kind of magic they were writing in binary code. Paul sat me by the window because artists need light, next to the brilliant engineers who would distill 600 years of publishing knowledge and craft down onto an 800K floppy disk. He wanted to have a user, a designer, help them with details like mitered corners and typographers' quotes that were so essential, and also push beyond the technical constraints to create a visual interface that felt natural to use. And in the process, Paul was building a company that embodied quality, craft, and collaboration to create human-centered software before that was a thing. The insistence of a free flow of ideas just found its way into everything between creative services and engineering. Not only that, but all of the tech support and customer service, documentation, all throughout the company. Everyone used PageMaker and shared their opinions with one another about it. Instead of a competitive hierarchy, move fast and break things, all this had a culture of creativity and collaboration that continues to this day. And many of us started corporations, foundations, families. When my oldest brother, who worked at IBM, advised me to proceed with caution about working for a startup, I didn't take his advice. My intuition steered me to work for a man with a rare blend of vision, integrity, humility, and attention to detail. Personally, Paul showed me that an introvert with a tenacious creative spirit can lead a revolution. Now more than ever, together, we need to imagine beyond business, beyond borders, beyond binary, and collaborate to create artful outcomes that inspire humanity. Because creativity isn't exclusive. It's a human thing, and collaboration with creativity is magic. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me okay? So just to remind you, I'm Ann Crumboltz. I helped spearhead the efforts of the Brainerd Foundation for 25 years. Debbie asked me to reflect on what was accomplished at the Brainerd Foundation, but highlighting Paul's character, leadership, and what he envisioned. So during the lifespan of the Brainerd Foundation, we worked tirelessly to protect our region's air, land, water, and wildlife. We supported nonprofits, communities, and decision makers in building the necessary conditions for that conservation to be possible. We're especially proud of successes by our many grantees, such as those that work to protect the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Area. Paul conceived of the foundation, but let me also give tribute to his sister, Sherry Brainerd, who served as a stalwart board member through the foundation's full history. In addition, the foundation had an impressive and seasoned staff, along with 20 insightful advisors over its tenure. There are many aspects of Paul to highlight, but let me just touch on a few which come to mind. First, Paul brought passion, expertise, and innovation from his tech, journalism, and management background to our grantee community. For example, he launched a group called One Northwest, whose initial job was to crawl under the desks of environmental nonprofits and literally connect them to the internet back in the day. In addition, he knew a foundation would achieve more in tandem with other foundations if we did more with other foundations than we might achieve alone. So we always work collectively with other funders to determine the most effective methods for communications, advocacy, policy implementation, and capacity building. And he believed that whether CEO of Aldous or board chair of the foundation, one must know one's customers, what they needed most to be successful. In other words, letting our grantees tell us what they needed rather than dictating. At the foundation, this included regular travel to parts of the region where we funded, spending time with organizations on the ground. Paul lit up with curiosity and questions during those excursions and challenged our staff to incorporate what was learned when we returned to the office. A second aspect of Paul was how he held us to the highest of expectations. For example, when Paul was trying to recruit a new executive director, that would be me, he flew to San Francisco so we could have lunch. After listening to his recruiting spiel, I was intrigued. I mean, this man was so smart and so driven, but I was kind of nervous about taking the job. When I told him why, I said, well, I was worried about being overly managed, that he might prefer someone who deferred to him a little more easily. Gulp. Well, he said, I promise not to micromanage you if you and your staff meet my expectations. So indeed, once hired, we tried to do just that. The third highlight about Paul was his fun side, as it could be missed since he could be quite serious on most days. One day, our office adopted this funny little stuffed animal that we called Kung Fu Fighter. Staff would grab that little critter and take photos of him around the office. But one afternoon, Paul nabbed Kung Fu Fighter and took him out for a joyride. Yes, he drove Kung Fu Fighter out to the 520 bridge for a portrait. We could not believe it. Kung Fu Fighter took a field trip to Lake Washington. I still wish I had a photo that he took of that little stuffed fella sitting on the rail of the 520 bridge. And finally, Paul was able to envision the future. He rejected the long-held foundation practice of continuing in perpetuity. He wanted to find new philanthropists who had the ability to contribute in the years ahead. I would be remiss not to mention one of our most successful grants in that regard, the Northwest Conservation Philanthropy Fellowship, built off the success of Social Venture Partners. Launching this program helped fill the gap which the Brainerd Foundation left when we closed our doors. It has strengthened the next generation of philanthropists, and its achievements continue to this day. In closing, Paul was humble about taking credit for any success, as you all know. When we asked Paul about sunsetting the foundation and how to highlight his legacy, Paul said, "Don't use that word, legacy. It makes me uncomfortable." And so we did our best to close our doors by simply highlighting our grantees and then embracing a private gratitude for all of Paul's insights as well as his benevolence. Paul, wherever you are, I hope you're climbing under rainbows to fiddle with computer wiring, taking beautiful photographs, eating Fran's chocolates, and sending continued inspiration our way. You may not like the word legacy, but sorry. You indeed have one that could not be more impressive.
Paul wanted an unmemorial day to not be about him on a day like this. That's pure Paul. And I never met the 520 Kung Fu dude. I don't know who that guy is, but Every one of us has a little bit of a different lens into Paul and his life. So I'm just going to share 3 qualities that define Paul for me. The first one you've already heard a few times, quality. There was a line in the first Geek Wire piece a few months ago about Paul. Said, he wasn't a yeller, Jake said. He would talk to you in a low voice, but Brainerd got the best out of people. I worked my ass off for him because I wanted to please him, and he was hard to please. That was Paul. He never settled, and never in a mean, inappropriate way. He applied this to his nonprofit work just as much as he did to Aldous. I remember one day he said to me, why would I work any less intensely about social change than I would about building a business? He had a very keen sense of quality. I've never known anybody that had the sense of quality that he did in the work that he did, in the causes he supported, and most importantly, the people he surrounded himself with. And he gave so many of those people, I see a bunch of them out here today that I know from SVP and other walks. He gave us a platform, a runway to express ourselves as civic and philanthropic leaders. And that was because of the quality of what Paul created. That connects me to another core trait for Paul. He cared. He cared about people. He cared about the work. He cared about the environment. He cared about the world. He didn't know how not to care. Now, we all know he wasn't exactly touchy-feely, but do not mistake that for not caring. You can see it in his path through life. He would move very intentionally from one thing and then the next, always just a few things at a time, that he really cared about and stewarding it so well before he moved on to the next big idea. And as for the touchy-feely part, there was one clear exception, at least in the time that I knew him in a slice of life that I knew him, and it wasn't even close. Debbie? Lastly, integrity. The definition of integrity is to reflect a state where your actions and core values are perfectly aligned. Sound like anyone you know? So I don't know anybody that worked harder than Paul did on building Aldous and the Brainerd Foundation and SVP and Islandwood. He always did it with integrity. I watched him envision and then steward and then transition the leadership of SVP. It was a master class in building something that was real and would last and had integrity. So SVP today is 28 years later. It's in 35 cities. It's 6 countries around the world. Our next annual summit will be in Mumbai. I will think of him next February halfway around the world. Nothing lasts that long and spreads that far and wide unless it was built on a foundation of integrity. I will simply close with a Ralph Waldo quote that has always meant something to me and to me speaks to Paul. The purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. Paul Brainerd's life was very well lived.
Hi, folks. It's great to be here with Paul's family, friends, colleagues, collaborators, co-conspirators. I was lucky enough to be one of the many, many people in Paul's orbit for a couple of decades, including 2 different stints as an advisor to the Brainerd Foundation Board, and for 10 years as the Executive Director of Conservation Strategies. Now, many of you may not know conservation strategies, although you may know the other things that Paul was involved in, and that was in part because it was by design. It was the late 90s. The foundation had been funding activists and organizations around the region to advocate for sound environmental policy, good pro-conservation policy, based in science. Yes, that was a thing back in the day. Hopefully it will be again soon. And Paul was reflecting on that and realized that in many the areas where those people were advocating, the politics were not exactly conducive to those strong policies. In fact, when he described it to me, he said, in some of these places, it's a technical term used in political consulting, it sucks, right? And Paul wanted to do something about that. So he set up conservation strategies and funded it. In many ways, it is a quintessential Paul project. It wasn't about building an organization. It wasn't about a name brand or taking credit or running campaigns. Rather, it was about getting resources, financial, tactical, and strategic, into the hands of people in the states to allow them to be more effective and to increase the political clout of the conservation groups that he was supporting through his philanthropy. I'll give you just a couple of examples of the work that we were able to do. Just a few weeks ago, it was the 25th anniversary of the successful Boise foothills levee. If you've been to Boise, there's these beautiful foothills. We partnered with the Idaho Conservation League, provided initial funding, polling for a ballot measure for residents of Boise to vote on to preserve the foothills. It was the first time in the history of Boise that people voted not only for a tax increase, but more importantly for a tax increase that would protect the environment and protect the foothills. That passed. Now there's 12,500 acres of the foothills still preserved. And the campaign manager of that campaign from 25 years ago now serves as Boise's mayor. We were able to do some other things working with the state conservation voter leagues, trying to up their game, right, to help them get people elected. So we did candidate trainings throughout the region, training people running for local office and for the legislature and their campaign managers. And over time, trained hundreds and hundreds of candidates in the 5 states. In the spirit of today, I want to give a shout out to all of those people who stepped forward, win, lose, or draw, trying to make their communities better, trying to advocate for strong environmental policies. The good news is that many of those people also won. So I want to just highlight a couple of them to give you an example. Here in Washington, former state legislator and member of Congress, Derek Kilmer. Current lands commissioner, Dave Upthegrove. As I mentioned, the mayor of Boise, Lauren McLean, right? These are people who came out of the training. In Alaska, Hollis French and Les Guerra, state senator and state legislator who respectively served 12 and 16 years advocating on behalf of these policies. So we were able to do that because Paul stepped up and didn't micromanage and said, here's $1 million a year, let's see what we can do. And we were able to have some real impact. I would say that although Paul has left his earthly robes and isn't with us here, his fingerprints will continue to be on this region for decades to come because of not only the other things you've heard, but the kind of work that we were able to do. So thank you, Paul.
Hey everyone. How wonderful to see so many of you here in honor of Paul, but also as he requested to have this gathering be not too much about him. I'm Ben Klasky, and I had the honor of working at this place, Islandwood, as its executive director for 12 years, alongside Debbie and Paul and many others. When this magical place was just very first imagined before my time here, Paul didn't just ask if we could sneak in a few green features. I'm not liking this, there we go. He went all in on sustainability. And to help him make this dream happen, there was a crew of people from a place called Methuen. Some of them are here today. Rich, good to see you. I wanted to call out Dave Goldberg because I think, Dave, you kind of cut your teeth on this project, if we're being honest. And it was early in his career. I've seen pictures. And he's gone on to help lead Methuen and to serve as the board chair here at Islandwood. With Dave and Methuen's help, Islandwood became the first gold LEED building campus this side of the Mississippi. I think it was 5th or 6th in the country. And long before green buildings were a thing that people were talking much about, before they became mainstream, Methuen helped us have a living machine that cleans the water with plants and microorganisms. They harvested the wood, and if you look at the outside of the buildings here, the wood that was here, the trees are used in the buildings you're sitting in. Really cool materials all over the place, straw in the walls of the art studio, and pavers. My favorite is that the pavers near one of the buildings were from demolished material from the King Dome, if you remember the King Dome. Now, for those of you that are not from Bainbridge, you need to know that opinions here on the island are sort of a renewable resource. Everyone in our fair town of Bainbridge has a position and a sub-position and concerns, and a friend on a committee who knows what's going on. But before construction began here, Paul and Debbie went door to door and talked to the neighbors about what their vision was, and didn't just say, here's what's going to happen, but listened to them and got ideas for it so it was better. And those initial conversations actually led to one of the most important parts of Islandwood, which is our docent program. They brought in people like Dick Baker, who's passed, Jeanette Franks, who's here today, Ellen Miyasoto, and Jim and Ginger Thrash. And many other docents through the years have been some of the most important ambassadors for this place, but they've also been our ears on the ground, listening to the community and helping this place know how to serve those around us. Paul and Debbie involved volunteers from day one. And one of these individuals we want to recognize today, it's Melinda West. She is a Pacific Northwest basket maker who has been practicing and teaching natural fiber weaving for more than 40 years. She studied under master weavers like Ed Carrier, who I had the pleasure of meeting, and she's helped carry the cultural knowledge embedded in traditional Coast Salish handmade baskets. A final point that I want to remember Paul is the way in which he set a tone that encouraged people to lean in. And he really believed that there was no job beneath anyone. A part of the lore here at Islandwood is that Paul helped clean the toilets himself. You know, here he was, a tech legend that you've heard about, created desktop publishing, little things like that, and he was down on all fours scrubbing the toilets. This ethic of service rubbed off on others, and there are many stories, including another person we wanted to recognize, Lori Miller, who's here today, who stood up on a desk at one point because we had a fire sprinkler break, and she got drenched as if she had been in a swimming pool for the team. I once, before a big event, spied, I know she's here somewhere, Beth Morgan on all fours as well, pulling weeds before the big event to make it look nice. It would already look pretty nice. Board members today can still be found helping kids come to camp, checking them in. Our current CEO, Megan Karch, and her team can be seen on many days quietly cleaning up spilled milk and ushering kids to where they need to be going. We're going to miss Paul and his quiet, thoughtful, go big attitude. But you can rest assured that his love for sustainability, his ability to listen to others, his humble servant attitude is living on both at Islandwood and also many of you that are here today. Thanks.
I'm shrinking. Hi there, I'm Catherine James Shoemaker, and I had the extraordinary privilege of working alongside Paul as a colleague, a collaborator, and a friend, both in my roles at Aldous and Islandwood, and now with the Headwaters down in New Zealand. Paul was very aware that the Headwaters was his final legacy project, something that brought together threads from all the different organizations and ideas you've already heard about this morning into a capstone project that would live alongside each of these organizations as a lasting gift to New Zealand and the world. Paul and Debbie fell in love with New Zealand over a period of about 20 years, returning again and again to explore its soaring mountains, crystalline waters, beach forests filled with native birdsong, and some of the nicest, most down-to-earth, caring people in the world. Ultimately, the wee village of Glenorchy, populated by about 500 people and about 100 times as many sheep, called to them and they built a home. They both dove into what is always called to them, a shared sense of purpose, shared sense of purpose, captured in the notion of Tikkun Olam, heal the world. Debbie started the Headwaters with a crazy idea to buy a little old rundown campground and general store and, in classic Debbie style, fix it up. What sprung from that was a shared vision to create something magical and lasting that beckons us to slow down, spend time outdoors in nature's embrace, and connect with each other in meaningful, life-affirming, inspiring ways with fascinating people we meet along the way. The Headwaters is now a beautifully curated general store and a warm, inviting eco-lodge that wraps around you like a cozy home away from home. I invite any of you and all of you who have not been down to visit to please come. It's amazing. With 14 rooms, beautiful meeting spaces, a fresh, healthy dining experience with produce that's grown in its own gardens and year-round solar greenhouse that Paul was so passionate about, the lodge sits humbly amongst the towering mountain ranges and glacier-clad mountains that surround it. Always a boundary pusher, Paul saw the Living Building Challenge as an aspirational framework that could bring the team together and inspire everyone to think outside the box by asking the compelling question, what if every act of design and construction could actually make the world a better place? As you'll soon see in the video to follow, Paul and Debbie convened an extraordinary team of talented artists and creative engineers and asked them to collaborate deeply and in ways they'd never done before to create something that no one had ever seen. In doing so, Paul was really in his element, inviting those collaborators to make the Headwaters both extraordinarily warm and beautiful, as well as a living model for his deep care for our people, our planet, and the financial sustainability that could give back profits to the community of Glenorchy in perpetuity. Many of the creatives who helped bring the Headwaters project to life are here with us today, and if Paul were also here, I know he'd be delighted to be sharing specific thanks to landscape and stone mosaic artist Jeffrey Bale, who literally cast Paul and Debbie's vision in stone, both here on Bainbridge Island, here at Islandwood, and at the Headwaters Eco Lodge. Krista Seymour, who was the professional wrangler for all of the family office and admin funding things. Marjorie Sheldon, who I always thought of as our procurement Santa Claus. She brought many of the beautiful items into Mrs. Woolley's General Store that have put it on the map. Norma Eliason, delighted to meet you in person for the first time. Paul's right hand for all the financial and tax advisory purposes. Lori Miller, who pulled up sticks and moved to New Zealand and then fell in love with the love of her life. She worked to put the project on sound, operational, and financial footing. Hardworking Headwaters General Manager Kylie Broxton, who we've had the opportunity to have leading that organization for us for the last 3 years. And then I'd like to call up a couple of special people. Debbie and I would both like to recognize Andrew Spencer, who has been indispensable counsel on all the details of New Zealand tax structure, governance, and planning that's enabled two Seattle people to make their great big dreams come true. Andrew's traveled here from New Zealand to be with us today. Deidre Wager, who alongside Megan Karch and Dave Goldberg have stepped up to serve alongside Debbie and I to steward future investments that will complete the project and ensure both its resilience and the financial sustainability for the long term. Thank you, dear Deidre. And last but not least, Katie Jennings. Many of you know her gifted storytelling capabilities, and she put those to amazing use as capturing Paul and Debbie while Paul was still feeling good, and crafted the video that you're about to see about the shared vision and the creative spirits who made the magic at Headwaters come into being. Thank you, Katie. And these are just the folks who helped put the wind beneath the Headwaters wings. As you know, Paul literally worked alongside thousands of people throughout his life to help make each of us and this beautiful, challenging world a better place. Indeed, you and the literally millions of others affected by Paul's fertile vision, you and Debbie, are the people that fueled Paul's passions and made his life worth living. In closing, I want to share one of Paul's favorite things that he liked to do at the Headwaters. Whether he was wandering through the lush native gardens or welcoming people to the warm, inviting spaces at the Headwaters, he absolutely loves stopping guests and asking them, what's one thing that you saw here that you might take with you back home to do there that would make this world a better place? And so I ask you today, invite you to take a moment and ask yourselves as you head home, what's the one thing you'll take away from your time with Paul that you'd like to do to help make this world a better place? Am I supposed to introduce Katie, or are you going to do that? Yeah. You're going to get a chance to see Katie's amazing video now.
See the mechanical systems, the solar energy systems, the electrical systems that allow us to obtain this high level of sustainability that's never been accomplished before in this country.
I've been really more involved in the aesthetic vision and what will the place look and feel like to the people who come into those spaces. And then I'm always trying to hide his technology.
She is always trying to hide all this work I've done.
The Headwaters hosted several community focus groups early on, just to learn more about the cultural and natural history of the area. Some of our builders also engaged in the creative spirit and worked alongside local artists and craftspeople. The culmination of their talents helped us create strong visual narratives that give the Headwaters its uniqueness. And really, it's all these details that provide the heart and soul of the place and its connection to this beautiful area.
This project is really all about energy and beauty and demonstrating those to a world-class level.
A lot of people don't see the art within themselves because of something somebody may have said even when they're at primary school, and they've taken that on. There's like a powerful calm in the forest. The forest is very protective. They grow all sorts of, mosses and lichens, and yeah, it's quite a magical place. I enjoy working with driftwoods and just anything where I can allow nature to dictate the shape. It's still alive, and if you go into the heart of the timber, you can almost see the soul of it, in the grains and stuff like that. This is, I believe, making a difference. I hope it's a great education facility for people that are looking at another way of doing things, and it should be an example of what you can do.
Sometimes you look out and you go, oh my, the light is amazing, right, grab the camera, go and capture something. Because you can see, you've trained yourself to see the light. It's the light that's making the image. The mountains are always changing, and you can always get something different. If it's your job to go out and capture it, then you have to make yourself in all kinds of weather and all kinds of light. You have to capture all of it. The glass at the entryway, it's composite. So I needed a photograph of the cabbage tree, photograph of the flax, and photograph of the tuis. So different tuis at different times, different places, all brought together and composited onto the one image. And that's kind of how we got the image above in the loft as well. Again, composite. I tortured my poor cat to get the image of it playing a fiddle. There's a little dog laughing, and we had to find the dog. The sheep, he's reading a newspaper which has got about a cow jumping over the moon, so you have to look very closely for that.
I think creativity is something that comes from the heart, and everybody has a different vision on the world and a different way that they capture it and a different way that they see it. I mean, you can have 5 photographers standing together in one place and they'll all see something completely different and capture something completely different. My work's taken me to over 65 countries, and I'm always travelling and away, and you know, if I had to choose somewhere that I wanted to come home to and call home, this was going to be it. I don't know how you put it into words. You walk outside and you just feel it. It's special. I mean, in the image that we're talking about in the background here, we have on the left hand of the frame, we have the Dart River, which is a large braided river. And then on the right hand side of the frame is the Reese River, which comes down from the Reese Valley, enters the lake. The source of the Reese River is up at the top of the Reese Valley, and that's all glacial fed, comes from the big ice fields up over towards Mount Aspiring National Park. The Dart River, where it enters here, has water that comes in from the Rootburn Valley. You can travel in any direction here and find something mind-blowingly beautiful, but to tie those all into the context of where we are, that is the key. And when you get that elevation, you see all of these special places tied in and all leading back into where we're lucky enough to live. It's pretty cool.
I had to laugh at the presentation today. I think it's the first time in my life I've been associated with beauty. Yeah, because in the beauty thing, and then Deb turns, then points to me and says, "Oh, and then in the beauty we've got Hilton here," and I'm going, "What? No, that isn't right. That's not right." Well, carving to me is something it's always been a luxury hobby. It's just something I've always done from a little kid, just with a knife, sadly in trees. So it's always been a hobby, and I've always done it like Christmas. It was a cheap option for me for Christmas and, like wedding presents and stuff, and just do signs and give them to people, just do it the day before or something when I've forgotten to buy something. Everything's hand-drawn, everything's self-taught. I've never had a carving lesson in my life. So as you get these impromptu opportunities in life, and you just got to take it.
Living a reasonably independent, semi-isolated life, you just experiment with things. So I mean, I've always mucked around with textiles. Farming, we're out on the land all days, all weathers, and it's an endless challenge trying to capture those brief moments. I see colour. I don't see stories. I see colour, and I see the changing light, and and you see the weather. Well, look, I mean, this is such a huge, raw, stunning landscape, and the fact that we're, farming means we're out in that all the time. Go up the hill and look down on those braided rivers. they're just stunning. You know, and there's a lovely meandering flow to them. I stitch very fast without being terribly analytical, because then I can get back outside again. So it's old silk shirts and old blankets, just sort of stitched together and reinvented. Because I really like to think that something gets another life after it's, you know, after it's finished one.
For some reason, I'm just attracted to rustic things. If you gave me a gold nugget or a rusty piece of steel, I'd probably choose the rusty piece of steel. No one really knows exactly what they look like. So the mower that I did depicts quite a athletic and slim and elegant one. And we did one first and then looked a bit lonely, so I said to Debbie, why don't we give her a teenager? Each feather is individually made, but basically she's made from 10 44-gallon drums. Yeah, Debbie wanted a range of lampshades, and so we just made different lampshades with materials flying around the workshop, and that was easy. And so they're all different. That was the only brief, and nothing too shiny. It's easy to say this is one of the most amazing facilities in the world.
The whole building is a piece of art, really. And they've tried very hard from the beginning to involve as many artistic elements as possible, and that's been wonderful for the local community. The piece is called O Waka, and it is based on a stone waka. A waka is a vessel used by Maori, ocean-going and inland water vessel. The stone itself had this beautiful form at the bottom which just spoke of a vessel. The place that I found the stone at my friend's farm, the town in Catlin, is called Owaka. In Maori it means place of canoes. It's a simple work that does all the talking. The essence of the narrative is that we're all on a journey.
I see the world through a square. So wherever I'm looking, whether that square happens to be a mountain peak or whether it's everything I'm seeing through the front screen of the car, it's still a square. I see images all the time and I think to myself, oh, that would make a nice photograph, or that would be lovely hanging on the wall. I've got a visual brain. Carol, my wife, and I are members of the local book club. I don't read. I can't read. Well, I can read, yes, but I don't. Just love the wide open spaces of this environment in the South Island. All I've got to do is press the shutter button. The scenery does the rest. It's not the equipment that you're using that is creating the artistic photograph. It's what you're seeing in your brain. So I tell people, don't worry if you haven't got the expensive camera. If you've only got a little cheapie, still go out there and capture photographs.
I was blown away by the landscape and how magnificent it was. There's two rivers that flow in, the Reese, which is a smaller river, and then the Dart, which is really the main river, and it flows into Lake Wakatipu, and that's kind of why Glenorchy is here, because it's the head of the lake and where the river flows in. And it's this very magnificent braided glacial pattern. There's a lot of them in New Zealand because there's big glaciers and then all this sediment coming down. It was like the project should have elements in it that are as magnificent as the landscape that speak to it. I was like, if I'm going to build braided rivers, I want it to be literal. I want to get the stones from the river and arrange them in a way so that it actually is the river. And so I gathered all these materials and I brought them in and I started to build braided rivers, and then I figured out ways to incorporate them into the paths because I wanted to overlay the geography of this area. I was able to cut them open, which revealed the interiors. It is an incredible thing to see the interior of these rocks, because then you actually see the story of how they were formed. The landscape is literally connected to this place because of the intention of the design.
But I hope people that come here are inspired by the natural environment, the beauty of this country, and they take away inspiration that they can take home to make the world a better place.
How nice to have Paul in the room. That was something. I'm Martha Kongsgaard, an unindicted but named co-conspirator of many decades, as many of you are, with our Paul and Debbie, as it's difficult to talk about Paul without Debbie. She who, in his words, saw it as her work to hide his work that he worked on over all these many decades. A virtuous cycle for all of us, a clear win, even if it must have been hard work to take home those many married years. So thank you for this singular honor, Debbie, to call you all to lunch. Fear not, it's coming soon. And to be the wrap for this unmemorial, which Paul assiduously and so predictably, as we've heard over and over, wanted to be an unfuneral. Not a waste of time, not about him, as Ben said, what? But all about the people in the canoe with him on his life's journey in the Owaka. You know, it can be a trap at these celebrations to reach for the ponderous, tidy tale, to neatly wrap up a life in some contrived reach for meaning. But I was struck by the description we just heard about Owaka, the Maori word meaning water-going vessel. Quote, a simple word that does all the talking. As the landscape architect described, what a Brainerdian concept and way of life. As it works as a metaphor, this image of the canoe as an intention, as a generous worldview, as a value and aspiration, as a gathering spot, both a beautiful artifact, Debbie, and a technically honed vehicle, Paul, headed with purpose and a destination, concerned as he would be with what the boat was made of and who would build it. And who would it be powered by and guided by? And how much risk would they take on, and how high were the stakes? How rough the waters? How sturdy and thriving the crew? And all that. A simple word that does all the talking, that's an economical notion that Paul would have liked, much as he would now like me to just make a toast and sit down. But you know, on these occasions, the prerogative of the living often hijacks the wishes of the dearly departed. Never mind you, Paul, what about us? As we have needs to overlay a celebratory narrative, a sense-making story that begins to do an accounting of your life for us to learn from. See, it's about us, not you, Paul, which should make you feel better. Deflect, deflect, deflect. Remember, these people are different, and again, I'm lumping Debbie in with Paul. At Islandwood, where I received an irreplaceable front row seat master's class in radical generosity, strategy at scale, and crazy humility, the big head-scratching question that always lingered was this: who spends over a decade buying and saving a huge tract of land on an island? Bainbridge I'm talking about here, but ditto to the South Island in New Zealand, building a school, creating a green building code, standing up a grad school, changing the ELARs in Olympia with half your fortune, and not name it or even the bird blind after yourself. That is classically Braynerdian. So I'm so happy to be in this lucky lineup, getting a kind of proxy cool here with these amazing creatives, most of whom I've been in the canoe with for many decades, who represent so much of what is radical, historic, and trailblazing about the 30 years of Paul's footprint, heartprint, on this greenest corner of the continent and beyond, who exemplify the swath of innovation and thought leadership, catalytic creativity and policy work, high risk, high potential, and highly leveraged power-shifting, trust-based philanthropy Paul pioneered well before it was branded as such, that has now been blazed across the planet by this juggernaut, where it's now sequestered in this beautiful log and in city plans and buildings the length of the Emerald Corridor, in how the movement has morphed and where it now thrives, how the work gets done, and saliently by whom. The tent that we all, together with Paul, over these decades, built, it's unrecognizable now. It's how business is getting done as Paul and his thousands of allies inspired, listened, sued, organized, incentivized, grew leaders, convened, invested in the capacity of the broader civil society beyond the traditional thin green line, and led by example with humor and humility over the long haul at what looks now, with both a backward and a forward-looking glance, like honest-to-God change at scale. And so what to say? Or sing, which I'm not going to do, because I can see Paul would be rolling his eyes, because I did that many a time in this hall, much to his chagrin, I'm sure. We who widely experience the depth and pervasion of his profound commitment to the planet's welfare, here in what we call Salmon Nation, this part of the country Wallace Stegner called Hope's native home, where Paul was born and his moral imagination developed. We rejoice knowing that he always knew, as they say, that pessimism and spending time in the fetal position evolutionarily has no survival value. Humility and high standards do. Hard work does, wonder does, decency does, humor does. And this is the through-line watermark of Paul's footprint, heartprint on this planet. I remember once Bill Ruckelshaus saying that being head of the EPA was a little bit like running the 100-yard dash while getting an appendectomy. And I'm sure it felt like that more than once over Paul's capacious career, whose imprints, as I said, was splashed across the planet like a shield. I'm sure it took a toll on him, but we were not let into that. So let's conclude by saying, here's to a quiet revolutionary who modeled the stealth force of a great idea, backed with generous piles of capital, executed as a reach for a better planet for people and animals without ever referencing himself. Who does that? Our Paul. So rest in peace, dear friend. We'll keep rowing half blind without you as best we can on the course you so generously set. And now let's break bread together, shall we?